So we learned about React components. React components. So in this, so many points I explained. So when you are dealing with the React components and working with them, so we learned how to create and work with function component. So what is a component? How component is designed? So how we create a function component? These are the basics. As I already explained, component comprises of three things. So we have a presentation or markup. It is designed with HTML, and we have styles. Styles are defined with CSS, and we have logic. So the logic is defined in JSX. We use JavaScript extensions. Right? So what I showed in the last session, one simple component how to add and use in the web page. Now today we will see how these components are used to build a complete page. That means we will see how we can work with multiple components. We'll see how do we work with multiple components in application. So multiple components, how we can design, how we can create the interface. So for example, as I already showed you, suppose let's take example of Netflix. This is Netflix, and in this is the Netflix index. In this index, it is having background, some image, colors or something. We have a header component. In the header component, we have Netflix header, right sided drop down, and this sign in button is there. And we have a main component. This is actually the main component. In the main component, we have some main content, and in that there is a register component. We have a register component. After that, there are so many other things. These are all section. This all comes under the page section. In the page section, you have banners, and we call this as accordion. This FAQs, this is accordion. After that accordion, we have again register component, and we have footer. At the bottom, we have the footer. Few things we will try today, because you can't achieve everything. This is your first level of example, right? Because if you have to achieve everything, then you need to learn so many things in React. At first level, we will see how much we can handle this, how to design this environment. So let's create some interface like this. First, you need a blueprint for this. The blueprint is, you need to know what are the components used for this presentation, and we need to build accordingly, right? Let's see. So let's open our project here. Let's take the project. So this is our React application. We already created a React shopping. Yes, this React shopping. Now, yesterday we already designed a register component. I showed you how to install and set up the Bootstrap, right? So once you configure the Bootstrap, you can start using Bootstrap to make the presentation effective. Now here, when you are configuring, let's see. We will go to the public. In this, you can see index page. Already this architecture I explained. It will start with which one? Root, right? We have to render everything into this root. Okay. So what I will do now, let's go to SRC. Yesterday we created a folder called components. Now let's design. Register component is already there. So we will design other components for our project. Let's add a new file. This is Netflix header component.js. Okay. Next, another new file, Netflix main component.js. We have Netflix header, Netflix main. Okay. We have a Netflix footer component.js. Okay. And we have register, right? So this is all the components initially we are using, but it should start with index. So what we will do is, we will create a Netflix index component. We will use Netflix index component.js. Index component.js, that means it is the Netflix index page. That means our project must start with which component? Index. It will start with this component. Okay. And we have header, footer, register, main, all these things. So if it starts with index component, I will do one thing here. I will add the function here. Already we learned it can be export, it can be default function. It's a JavaScript function. Netflix index component. Okay. We will learn all techniques. There are so many shorthand techniques also we will see. So in this, we already learned it should return markup. And as I already told you yesterday about JSX, so some JSX rules we discussed. In JSX, we discussed that entire markup must be in a container. Entire markup must be in one container. Later, you are going to learn fragments and others also. And a container means it can be anything. So we will use a container div. You can use a div container, or you can also use, because what is problem with div is it adds a div to existing div, because root is also div. Because you saw in index HTML page, in index HTML page, it is already a div. In this div, again, why to create a div? Directly add content inside it. In that case, what we do is, so instead of using div, you can use empty container like this. We can configure an empty container. Or we can also use a React fragment. We can use a React fragment. By using React fragment, by using this React fragment also, you can add a container. You will understand those in later stages, how to use them. So initially, because this is our first day of working with components after yesterday, more complex things. So we will see how to use general markup for presentation. So we are designing either div or this we will use. I will do one thing here. I will go to return, and here we will keep a div. And I will keep the class name as container fluid. Already in the rules, we discussed that we have to bind everything to the properties, right? Not to attributes. In this is actually Netflix index action. That means this is the Netflix index. So keep it like this. Currently it is empty. There is nothing inside it. It is empty. There is nothing configured. If you want to add some effects to this, right? You want to add some effects into this, you can keep in a separate CSS file. That means we can configure in a separate CSS file. So here you see the CSS file. Suppose I'm using the CSS file for this Netflix component. CSS file means I will add a new file. What is the name? Netflix index component.css. Netflix index component.css. That is the CSS file for index component. In this, you can write the styles that you want to use for the component. What are the styles you want to use for the component? You can configure here. So for example, as of now, what we will do is simply for this, I will put the background color. Suppose wherever container fluid is used, we will put a background color. Background color, I will just keep it as black. I'm just keeping background color as black. And this container, I will keep so height as auto, so that it will automatically adjust. Or you can use height as 100. So Vmax, we can use 100 Vmax. We can define Vmax, right? So that means maximum height. So how much maximum height is there? Viewport maximum, that is Vmax is viewport max. We can configure that, or you can define specific height also. We can define specific height, right? Now here, once we use this, and we want the Netflix component to start up. And to start up this Netflix index component, you know, in index.js, we have to import it. Okay. So here we have to inject. So how to import? We have to import, what is it? Netflix index component. So Netflix index component. From which location? So first we will define from /components. In the components, we have Netflix index component. From there, we have to configure this Netflix index component. Index component. We need to configure this. This is the Netflix index component. So we are configuring it. And you know that it is marked as default now. If it is marked as default, then you can directly access it, right? You don't need to define this parenthesis. So this is Netflix index component. So we are configuring that. Now I want this to start with this. That means it should start with Netflix index component. It should start with Netflix index. That means our project will start with index component. Let's start. So npm start. So we are accessing index component and keeping in the startup. Meanwhile, it is running. Meanwhile, we will design others also, right? We don't have any content inside it. It is completely empty. Huh? So we don't have anything in this component. So not even a single line of text. We kept anything inside it. Yeah. So it is empty. Actually, for your confirmation, I will just keep here in the index component. I will say index. Just for the confirmation, it is index. But that CSS is not applied. So we have to import. We have to import. Import what? We have to import the file dot slash. So we have Netflix index component, Netflix index component dot what? CSS. We imported this in the main page, right? We imported this in the main page. I am importing Netflix index component dot CSS. It is black. That means it is having the background complete black. So I will go here and I will make here text color as white. So that is the color white that is applied for this. So this is index component working fine. It has its own CSS. There are so many techniques to keep a background picture. You need all your CSS knowledge, right? So as I already told you, without CSS, HTML, Bootstrap, JavaScript, you are not a React developer, right? You are not a React developer at all, right? You need good knowledge of this. Now, next up here is, suppose background images. Later, I will explain those background images. Huh? So suppose I will keep here. So what the option is, let's go. We have public. In the public, we have already, public contains all static resources. In the public, I'm using here. Yeah, I will copy some image. In my machine, I have some images. Into the public folder, let me copy some images. So in my computer, I have some images. So let's go to that images location. I have this Netflix back image. So I have that Netflix back image, which is actually a PNG file. I'm having this. I copied into public folder, right? And here I am just defining. Suppose instead of background color, I'm trying to use background image. Background image URL. It is a Netflix back.png. I'm using background image Netflix back PNG. That means you see it has some issues. Because generally where you keep your resources, all this configuration is important, which I will explain. That's the reason beginning itself I haven't taken any images. Actually, suppose dot slash or say it is in a public folder now. We have public slash, in that we are displaying that image Netflix back. You can see the path is wrong because from which location it should access the static resources you have to configure, which we will learn how do we configure images, what the references, how to configure them and use them. Suppose this image is present in the same location currently, means I will drag and drop this and put it in the components location. That means where the components are present in the same location, I kept that image also. In the same location we are keeping, now it's work. From other location, how we access, that requires configurations. So to mention from where to pick the static resources and all, we will discuss. As of now, we will keep our CSS, our resources, everything in one folder, right? Now this is background. And of course, you know that you cannot make this background less dominant, because background, if I want to control, I will use background size. I will keep background size as contain. So contain, it will be better. It will fix that, but it is more dominant, right? And of course, you can't do anything, because if you put transparency, then it will put transparency for entire page. Later, you can try some techniques for that. So actually what we do is general. In this is the fluid which have all this content. Now what I will do is in this, I will put another container. And for this, I will put a class name. And the class name I will keep as suppose box. Okay. Now what I will do here, I will add dot box and background color RGBA. I will use RGBA, red, green, blue, alpha. So this will be 000. That means it will be background black. And height, I will keep the same option what is there for this. That means the height will be like this. So actually when you define the width, so we have to define, so V max. So viewport max for the width also it will fit. We can have height and width adjusted in this way, right? We can configure the height and width. Now what we do is this transparency, I will keep 0.5 or 6 transparency I will give. Then it will give a transparent background. That will be better. That is a transparent background. That means we are not allowing this to dominate. We are not allowing this to dominate. Just we are keeping it transparent. That looks okay. Now what we need to do here is, this is your index. Index is ready. And in this index, I need a header. I need a header. So let's go and design the header component. Netflix header component. Now we will design the header component here. So export default. So function. This is Netflix header component. And what this should return? It should just return a empty container. I will use just empty container. And in this, what we will do is we will keep another box. And here I will keep just the heading. I will keep as Netflix. Netflix. You can use any font styles, banners, logos. You can put any picture, anything. Just temporarily, I will use this. And I will put the class name as text danger. Okay. And after this, we will put another container here. So that means this, let's keep this also in a container. Yeah. In a container, this is header. And right side here, I'm adding a button and I'm adding a drop down, right? I'm adding a drop down. In the drop down, I just given an option. So as a language, option as language, and here button I given as sign in. And language, you can have another option. This is like English. We can use our custom drop downs using Bootstrap also. I will keep it simple in the beginning days, right? And here I will just keep button sign in. For this, we will have a class name called BTN and BTN danger. I will use this one. Now, usually this is the header component. Now see, I want these two side by side. Then I will keep this container with a class called deflex, display flex, and I will keep justify content between. Display flex and justify content between. And I will keep little bit padding. So as 3, P3, padding 3. Now this is header. Now where you want that header? In the index component at the top, I want header. That means now let's go to index component. This is your index component. In this index component, in this box at the top, I want header. We don't need to design header here. Already header is designed as a component. We have to import this here. That means what we do, we have to import, what is it? Netflix header component from that file. And here we have to access that component and render. How the components are rendered, just like a tag. Just like a tag. That means Netflix header component end tag. You can write an end tag or you can keep it self-ending. That means now the index, you will see the header is ready. That means in the index, we have this header ready. Suppose I'm keeping this header component. So even margin as 3. That means some space is kept around. Right. And for example, this is buttons. So what I can do is actually for that select, we can use a class name form select. Form select will keep like this. So in that case, you can do one thing. You can keep this class name as input group. Input group will keep both side by side. Right. But I don't want that much lengthy input group. Right. So usually we have to define using the width and height. I can use suppose W25. That means width 25. It will fit like this. I want, so as suppose this is margin start 2 pixels. That means it will have some gap between those two. Now this is at the top we are having. Those globe symbols and all Bootstrap dropdowns. I am not going that much in depth as of now, right? Because this is our beginning level, right? Because many people don't have proper idea of any Bootstrap classes and all those things, but it is mandatory. So now this is ready, header is ready. So when header is ready, now below this we need main content. Below the header we need main content. So we will go here, we will go to the Netflix main component, Netflix main component.js. Let's design the main component. So export default function Netflix main component. Okay, this main component should return, it should return empty container. In this we want to return all this content. Let's keep a div, and in this div we want to return all this part, unlimited TV shows, watch anywhere. So what I will do is, let's copy this. I will keep a heading style and this one, and I will keep another heading style. So I will keep this one, right? And let's keep this heading one. Okay, fine. Now anything else here is that's okay, this is fine. Now this is your main component, this is the main component, and I will just put here class name as a text center. That is the class name. Now I want that main component below this header, below the header. So what we do, go to the index component. In the index component, this is already header, and below that header, actually this you can design by using your techniques of, you have header now. In the header you can keep your header component, and you can create a section. In the section we can create a main. In this main we can access the Netflix main component. Netflix main component, it will import that automatically here. Netflix main component is defined here. Now you can see the main is here. Now this main component I need to keep center. So if I would need to keep this center, you know what to do. So class name dflex, dflex is display flex, justify content center, align items center, items align, align items center. This is actually horizontally vertically center, keeping the content horizontally vertically center. That means you can see it will be center. You can have content, more content can be there, right? Now we need to keep the height also. To keep it center, we need to put a style. Or for this, suppose I want to adjust the height, then you need to maintain a separate CSS also for this. What I will do here, go to CSS, we have section height I given as, suppose, some 400 pixels. That means the section height will be 400 pixels, little down. Then it will be horizontally and vertically centered, horizontal vertically centered. Now what we are doing here is, suppose I am keeping this section, so width, suppose 50% of width, then it will keep there, right? Because it is entire section is shifted there. So we'll do one thing. For section we don't want to give the width. In the main component, this is the main component where you have the content. Here itself I will give width as some 75. Width as 75 for the content, it will be in this way. It depends. That means how much width you are giving, that is 100, that is the width. Width you can add for anything. So class name W some 50. That means it will adjust the width like this. So you can define 75. So wherever you want, you can configure that. Right? Alignments you can change. That means according to your requirement, you can change the alignments. I'm just configuring this normal. I'm not using this much. This is. Now below this, I need register component. You remember yesterday we already designed register component. Below this, I want register. Below this means in which location, inside the main component. That means you see inside the main component I want register. Inside the main component, below this I want register. That means inside that we want the register. Or you can keep it completely separate here in the index component. Below that main component you can keep, because actually main is treated as entry point of website. In that case, register, login, such things will be inside the main area. Suppose here I want to use the register component. Yesterday we already designed. What is it? Netflix register component. We are adding that register component below. This Netflix register component, you can see it is coming with some ready-made design because it is already having some effect. It is already having some effect. That is the reason it is coming in this way. What I will do is, for this Netflix register component, let's go in the Netflix register component, what we designed yesterday. So Netflix register component, we have done so many things. Container fluid and all these things we will remove, right? Height, width, and everything we are cleaning up, and we are just keeping this option, right? That means we are just keeping that option. Now it is ready. We have the register component ready. Now the paragraph which is present inside this So this paragraph, so class name text center, that means it will keep that center. Now we have the register component also ready. That means we are having a header, we are having a main, and we have a register component. Yesterday already we designed it separately, right? With input group and all, we configured it and we are just using it. And what is the now specialty here is, now below this you can design whatever sections you want, whatever content you want, you can configure. But what I want is, suppose I want this register component to repeat. That means this is the index component. I want this register component somewhere else after section, right? Inside the section, after section, anywhere I want to use that. Then suppose I'm using inside the section only after the main. So I'm using another container. And here I'm using again Netflix register component. I can access that again. Then you can see it comes again. But actually you should not use inside this because I kept display flex. So it should be kept outside the section. Because I kept display flex, obviously it will keep side by side. Then you can see it repeats again. Any number of time you can repeat, anywhere you want, you can repeat, right? That means you can reuse this component anywhere. We can reuse the component anywhere. So we can keep it any number of times, any location, anywhere we want. For example, now rest of things, suppose we have another option, suppose footer. We have a Netflix footer component. So let's design this. And here I will keep export default. So Netflix footer, yeah, Netflix footer component. And we will return some markup here. So in this container, so let's keep a div. Yeah, it's an empty container in that I'm keeping a div. And here, suppose I'm writing like some class as row. Okay, and here I will keep div. This is class name as call. In the footer, I have suppose 4 columns. I'm using 4 columns here, equally distributed 4 columns here. And you can see the Netflix footer here. So they have some questions, right? I will keep that here. So above the row, I will keep that here. And in this column, you can see they have some FAQ. These things are there. Yeah, let me copy this part, FAQ relations. Yeah, let me keep it separately so that I can access them up to this, right? Speed test. Okay. I will keep an unordered list. So I will keep here an unordered list. So class name as list unstyled. And here we have list items. And we have these options, FAQ, right? Yeah, that is FAQ help. Let's investor relations. I will keep one and we will copy the duplicator. So investor relations, something, yeah. Relations, yeah. I'll copy that, keep as a list item, and another list item, just 1-2 options, account center. So help center and account media center, all these, okay. And another is media center, something. Okay. And all this, I will do one thing, copy this same. You can keep different content. Just I am copying the same, okay. You can keep different content there. As per your requirements, I'm copying the same there for the footer. So this return is having some problem in this. What is that? Function body. Already we have a function I haven't written. Yeah. So that is the content. Okay, fine. Now this footer we have to use in our index component. In index, we will keep a footer, and here we will use Netflix footer component. We are adding the Netflix footer component below. Now you can see that comes here below. So we have some paddings and all these you need to control. Suppose I will put the class name as suppose margin 2, padding 2. These all matters. So how you keep your footers and contents, right? So I'm just using these options in the back. Colors, effects, everything you can do. Our concentration is to understand how to deal with multiple components. Right, our intention is to understand how to deal with multiple components. That means how we can access a component inside another component. This is the presentation with a lot of components used here. That means we have header, we have main, we have register. What is the point is wherever you want to use that again, then you have to just implement the component, call the component and use it. Right now, the challenge later you will face is how to communicate between components, transporting data from one component to another, how to interact with the components. That is a separate concept we will discuss. So initially our intention is to understand how to design component, how to call a component in another component and create a page. Later we can create navigations and so many other things, right? So this is to understand the components hierarchy in our application. So I hope everyone understood this, right? So in this we are creating all these functions. So we have register component, footer component, header component, main component, and index. And our application starts with index. Our application starts with index. And in that index, we are using header, footer, and main, and the register. And if you want effects for every component, you can maintain a separate CSS, the relative. But because I am majority using all Bootstrap, I don't need much CSS to use here. But if you have to separately deal with a lot of CSS, then you need combination of styles, right? How we can define and handle. So this is one simple example of designing application with components. Okay, how we can handle multiple components in application. So what we done is we created all function components. We created all function components. Actually, you can design class component. You can design class components. We can create class components and we can use class components. But we don't recommend so class components in the modern generation. And in the modern generation, so many techniques are there. Means how you design, how do you configure? There are so many techniques actually. That is the reason it leads to a little bit confusion for beginner of React without proper JavaScript knowledge. Why? Because suppose I will show you here function only means we have a function only. Now you observe here, I will create one component here. I will create a component called login. Okay, login component. It's a different one, not related to Netflix. Login component.js. And you see now here I am creating a constant. So login component, and it is using some option. That means what is this? That means actually, so this is suppose I'm configuring here. So I'm configuring here. I'm defining a div here. I am specifying a div, and here I am keeping a heading. So user login, just like this. Now you know that this is the habit of modern developers. Now the point is you learned JavaScript, right? You learned JavaScript. Now when you learn JavaScript, the question is, suppose we are using a function. That means we are configuring a function here. So here we have a function. So function name is some print, and this is the function. And we have a variable, so hello, and hello is a function, right? It is a function. It returns some details. Or first I will just give you here like this function. What is difference between these two? Is hello a function? Is hello a function? So hello is not a function. Then what it is? It is a function reference. It is not a function. It is a function reference. Now, what is the function? Function is anonymous. Am I right? You know that function without name is an anonymous function. What is the advantage of creating a function with a name and creating an anonymous function? Because if I want to access print, then I use print. If I want to access hello, I will access hello. Right? What is difference? What is difference between this? Remember, it will return and assign a value only when you use return. If you don't use return, it will not return anything, right? It will not return anything. Now, what is difference between these two? The difference is actually when we use this reference for function, generally we use this in a technique called callback. In a callback technique, we use this method. What is callback? Callback means in the memory location, the function may change according to situation. That means in the same memory location, there can be some another function depending on the situation. So callback decides which function to execute according to situation. It will decide according to situation which one to execute, right? That means now you need only memory. In that memory, you can load any function later. hello contains, suppose, so console.log, suppose hello like this. That means it is currently printing hello. But later, if I want, I can change this function. Later, if I want, I can change this function. That means later I want, I can change this function in that reference. You can change because that is memory reference. In the memory reference, you can load any function according to requirement. That means I want to allocate memory for a function. In that, there may be different functions coming according to situation. That is called callback. Right? In that case, we use this technique. No, always it will be only one print in the memory. Right? It will not change. There are no changes. In that case, we use function with the name. We can define both techniques here. That means this indicates that it may change. That is the reason we don't want it to change. That's the reason we make it as constant. So when you make it constant, then what happens when you make this constant? Generally, what is the meaning of constant? We already know. We can use var, let, anything. Constant means initialization compulsory. Constant means initialization compulsory, not constant. Constant means not constant or read only. If you say constant means read only, interviewer will ask you what is difference between read only and constant then. That means you don't know the correct point and you tell something, then you will stuck up. That means you say constant is read only, then he will ask, then what is read only? Because we have read only also, we have constant. Constant is about how to declare and handle a variable. Constant indicates that initialization is mandatory. Am I right? You learned in JavaScript. Constant means initialization compulsory. Can we assign? We cannot assign. Because of that, you may feel like it is read only, but it is not read only. It is about initialization. Means a constant variable cannot be declared. It must be initialized. A constant variable cannot be declared, cannot be assigned. It must be only initialized. That means now what happens is, this is the memory. Into that, you are configuring a function which returns this functionality, Why people have habit of doing this? So why not directly like this? What is the another point is that what is the concept about this is, it will allocate new memory. It will allocate new memory for function. It will allocate new memory for which function? Print. If any manipulations happened inside that, for those manipulations, another memory is allocated. Again, new memory is allocated for every functionality. For every result it is returning, it will allocate another memory. Now, what is the advantage of this is, it will use this memory for the function and the results of the function. That means the same memory is used for the function and the result. Whatever it is returning, it is in the same memory. Whatever function, it is in the same memory. That is the reason. So in JavaScript, you know that when you write a function, so if anybody asks why you need return for a function, what is the purpose of return? Right? This function is having A and B. What is the purpose of return? So without return, I can simply use C equal to A plus B na? Right? Then why to use return A plus B? That means now the function have to allocate three memories. One function memory where A and B are stored. Another separate memory where result is stored. This C doesn't belong to function. Understood? That means two memories are allocated. One memory for function where A and B are handled. Another memory for C, because it is a separate variable. Then what we have to do is, if I make it return A plus B, that means it will use the same function memory for the result also. That means it will perform the operation and it will use the same memory for the result. That means it is going to calculate A plus B and store the result in function 1. That means in one memory, it can do both the tasks. Why a function needs return? Right? Generally, people say return value. How it will return value? Return is a jump statement. Return is a jump statement. That means it terminates execution. It is not returning value. Right? That means it is not returning value. It is terminating. And when it is terminating, means it is discarding. It is discarding the memory. It is discarding the memory. It is discarding the memory and using the same memories to store the result. It will not allocate any new memory. So what is advantage of this technique is to use the same memory for all kind of manipulations. Don't allocate any another memory. This will be more faster and easier. But this is not satisfying every time. Sometimes we need discrete memory, disconnected. Once you finish that component, clean up. Don't continue. If I want to continue the components and use them, then better go with this kind of technique. If you want a discrete component, then you use function. If you want a continuous component, then you can go with this technique. So this is not officially a function. Now tell me how to export this. It is not officially a function, right? Then how you will export this? Without exporting, you cannot use it. Then we have to use an export statement. We have to use an export statement. Export, I said default, and what login component. I have to export this. That means we need to configure. We need to configure this separate memory. This memory need to be exported. Remember, this is an JSX element. It is saying that it is a function, which is returning some result. Now, how do we access this component? That means I am accessing an index. Suppose I will go to index.js. In index.js, I will access that login component. I'm using login component from the components. And you can see here, login is there. This is another technique. So that means how you design a component and configure. Previously, I created a plain component. So with a general JavaScript function, traditional. So depending on situation, people have different habits. People ask which one is best, right? If this is best, why the second one is allowed, right? If previous one is allowed, and if it is disabled, if it is not allowed, if you write a function, it says that don't write like this, write only in this way. That means one is best. They are allowing both techniques. They are not giving any warning. They are allowing both techniques. That means there are same importance for both techniques that you decide according to your requirement of the component, right? Whether you create a function. So if you have a lot of data to handle and the data need various memory allocations, because I don't want to mess up all the function with the memory with all component related results, then better go with a separate memory allocations. Depends on the requirement, right? So this is another technique of configuring a component. That means another example. This is the technique of, you can say arrow, right? Arrow technique. So that means we call this as callback mechanism. By using that, you can define a component in this way. All your components you can create like this now. Whatever I created, Netflix component, everything we can configure in this way. This is the components, how we design the components and use, right? This is enough for today, right? Now, in the next session, tomorrow, we will see very important, how to handle data binding in component, how to present data, how to display data coming from various sources, arrays, objects, lists, variables, how to use them, how to handle data from API, present them here. That is all data binding, which is very major now. Once you know how to design component, now we will see how to handle data inside the component. That we'll see in tomorrow's session.